Introducing Russell Coutts. The boss at the helm of SailGP, he's blazing a trail and redefining the sport of sailing as he goes. As sport's first climate-positive racing league, SailGP is connecting sport and sustainability in a way that few other leagues can. With next-level foiling boats powered by nature and driven by the best athletes on water. And as a world champion sailor in his own right, Coutts has won the biggest prizes in the game. But one thing's for sure, he's not slowing down as he enters his 5th decade at the top of the sport.
Well, Russell, thank you for joining us. We're here in Cadiz. There's a lot of activity going on down on the tech site to get us ready for the Spain Sail Grand Prix this weekend. We're officially at the halfway point of Season 3, so how do you think it's going so far?
We're really happy. I mean, the growth that SailGP is experiencing over particularly the last 4 to 6 months, I think is really great to see. I think when you look back, you know, this whole principle was founded on creating a sports and entertainment property that was really exciting to watch. And I think with the development of the teams are now at a stage where they can race these boats really hard. And pretty much any of the teams, perhaps with the exception of the Spanish today, but pretty much any of the other teams can now go out and win races and maybe even win events.
And I guess, you know, when you build a property like this, you know, you can build all the things around the edges, but ultimately the racing has to be an incredible spectacle. Yeah,
the racing has to stand up. At the end of the day, that's what's going to really get people watching it. You know, and I think in Saint-Tropez we really saw on day one, in pretty extreme conditions, we saw the teams all racing hard, and that was just fantastic to see. I think quite a few people have sort of commented afterwards that was perhaps the best racing sailing has seen, and I think there's a lot more to come. You know, as we add more teams, as we add more venues. You know, you look at our Season 4 calendar. You know, it's exciting to be part of this. You know, I think we, you know, as a sailing fan, of course, I'm mad passionate about it. It's great to see that sailing as a property can work when it's packaged right and you know, taken to the world as we're doing.
And you know, the first couple of seasons at SailGP, we saw Australia and Tom Slingsby have a bit of a stronghold on the fleet, and they seem to be at times unbeatable. But we're seeing a bit of a change this time. We've got some new prospects coming through in you know, Pete and Blair on New Zealand are finally looking really good, and Nikolai in Denmark and Quentin and France are showing promise as well. So you must be really pleased that you've got these kind of new personalities coming through to the top of the sport.
Oh, absolutely. And I got to say, I've got to eat my words in terms of Denmark. I question whether they had the talent on board to really compete at the top level, and they've proven me wrong. You know, they are competing at the top level. I think they can. I think they're serious contenders now to win events. You know, and they would now see themselves as actually moving from, hey, you know, can we do this, to actually we can do this. And in sport, having that confidence, having that belief that you really can. Of course, you can. People can try and sort of prop it up and fudge it, but the reality is, unless you truly believe it, it's not going to happen. And I think they actually now truly believe they can win. I think ultimately, you'll see the young guard, as I call it, take over from the old guard. That's a natural process in most sports, and I think we're seeing that evolution happening quicker in SailGP. You know, I think despite the Spanish issues, I've got confidence that they'll eventually come through. They've got plenty of talent on board. Whether they've got the composition of their crew right, their team right at the moment, I would question, but eventually I have a high degree of confidence that they can come through.
And what is it then? What do you think the secret is to winning SailGP? Because you've led, you know, your fair share of very successful teams and projects, and now you're at the helm of this amazing property in SailGP. You've been around success, and you know what it takes to win. So what do you think is the secret ingredient in SailGP?
Clearly this is a really challenging format, because you've really got to make all the same decisions that you would in the, let's say, slower forms of racing. All of your tactical decisions, in my opinion, are the same. You've got the same considerations, but it's happening so much faster. And to have that comms system on board in a way that it's synced well enough that you can get critical comms to the right person on board in the right time frame, and you have the right decision-making structure so that you're eliminating the possibility of missing things or you're having unnecessary errors. I think that's the big challenge in SailGP, because things are happening so much faster. You're really making critical decisions probably every 30 seconds. You've got to make the next critical decision. So the chances of getting that wrong are high. And that's why we're seeing the lead changes, the place changes. That's why we're seeing the mistakes in manoeuvres and so forth. And it's all very well to sit on the outside and say, well, that was obvious. But in the heat of the moment, when you're going that fast and you've got to make those sort of decisions that rapidly, I think this is taking it to a whole new level. And it's one of the reasons why I think you're going to eventually see the younger generation come through.
So, I mean, you talked about speed. We saw record-breaking speeds in Saint-Tropez just a couple of weeks ago, 99.94 kilometres an hour, so close to that 100. What is it going to take to break the 100? And what's the biggest next pioneer, do you think, in sailing or SailGP?
Yeah, well, the important thing here is what a lot of people don't understand is these boats, even in their current configuration, even with their current main foils, but with new rudders, would go a lot faster. So what the constraint is at the moment is that once the boats get to sort of 90 plus kilometres per hour, the teams are actually intentionally slowing them down because they are struggling to steer the boat with the rudders. So the rudders are cavitating, and I've never been at those speeds in any sailboat. I've never been at those speeds in an F50, but what I'm told is that the boat starts to shake. It feels like an aircraft in turbulence, and you're starting to, as faster you go, you're starting to get less and less control. Well, you can imagine when you're in a tight situation with a fleet of the other F50s, they're all trying to gun it towards Mach 1. It'd be pretty intimidating to somehow lose a degree of control on the rudders, So they are slowing the boats down, and if we could, and we know we can solve that problem, but once we design and build new rudders, even with the current foils, the boats will break through the 100 kilometre per hour barrier. Then the new foils that are in production now, so the new main foils, their onset of cavitation in sailing terms is 6 knots higher than the current onset of cavitation. So around about 10, 11 kilometres per hour higher boat speed. So you got to see, with the new foils and the new rudders, you'll see speeds of 110 kilometres per hour, which is amazing in a sailboat and pretty scary. And so we're also simultaneously putting in a lot of work into developing halos for the cockpits, like they've done in Formula One. The drivers are really concerned about the visibility, so they really struggle for good visibility now. And so there is already a collision warning system on board that they get notified when there's a chance of a collision with another boat. But we really want to improve some of those areas, and develop some sort of halo. Right now the concept is sort of a semi-circle, transparent structure over the top of the outside edge of the cockpits, which would obviously protect the sailors in the state of a collision. Also developing a Kevlar patch on the side of the boats that would stop the bows of another boat penetrating inside the cockpits. So there's a lot of work being done in developing those safeties. Also improving the collision response of the crash bow, because if a boat contacted, we don't want that bow to be too inflexible. We want it to actually disintegrate to an extent that will control the deceleration. We don't want an instantaneous deceleration. That can be very dangerous for the boat doing the collision. There's all of those things that we're really bringing to a new level, I think, and you'll see some exciting components, introduced onto the F50s over the next 2 seasons that I think are going to, be really interesting for those tech fans out there. A lot of people say to me, do we need a completely new boat? I'm not actually sure that we do. When you look at the evolution of motorsports, yes, the Formula One cars, for example, to use Formula One as an example, have evolved and continue to evolve. But in reality, the actual concept of the tyres being outside the cars, for example, hasn't evolved that much over the last, almost 80 years. In other words, they've kept the look of the brand the same. And I think that that's probably quite important for us going forward as well. We keep the actual look of the brand the same. The racing's great as it is. We keep improving that and keep improving the boats. But we retain that look of the boats. I think that is quite unique, actually.
Yeah, and I think we've seen recently, we've had several Formula One drivers come down and actually test out the boat. We've had Kevin Magnussen in Denmark, and more recently Max Verstappen and Checo Perez. So, what are you hearing from these guys, and what does it mean to SailGP and sailing and even wider, water sports as a whole, to have these kind of personalities, some of the biggest stars in the world, giving visibility to what we're doing in SailGP?
Yeah, I think it's been really cool actually to see the reaction of those people. I mean, I was on site when Verstappen and Perez were there, and had the chance to have lunch with them and talk about it. And they were. Verstappen opened up to me. He was really honest. It was nothing like he expected. Being on board the boat and seeing that the quality of the teamwork on board and the comms between the athletes. Of course, they don't really get that in F1 because there's the driver. Sure, they're communicating with their technical team, but they're not communicating with a group of other athletes. And they were super impressed to see how that all worked. The fact that the athletes has to cross sides, was something completely new to them. They're seated in their car doing 300 kilometres an hour. So it's super impressive what they're doing. But they're locked into position. And one of the things actually that Perez discussed with me was the halo concept. He said, the cockpit seemed really open. And I said, yeah, we're developing a halo type concept for that. And he said, yeah, you should,
And you talked about, some of having 9 boats on the water, and when we look at the start line, the start line's quite tight, and you've got a lot of boats going, full speed into try and get that edge on each other. So I'm sure there's a lot of interest from potential teams or new teams to come in. How do you balance that with the racing? Because I guess there's a finite amount of boats, right? And at what point do you have to look at reformatting or changing the way that we do things?
Well, the truth is, this concept's still brand new. We're learning. We've gone from 6 boats to 7 boats to 8 boats to now 9 boats. And each time it's been a pretty dramatic change, and we're learning things. And we're starting to talk about could we arrange the race course slightly differently to, for example, to avoid the one boat going up one boat going down one. That would be a pretty catastrophic situation. So. We're talking about that now. I personally think the practical limits somewhere between 10 and 12 teams on the race course at the same time. And we'd have to lengthen and widen our current weight race courses to allow that. But we'll see. We've certainly got a plan to expand in the future. We want to eventually be at an event every 2 weeks or thereabouts, which really creates the appointment to view. Why? Because then your fans that are following SailGP, they don't even necessarily need to know where the next event is, but they know it's in 2 weeks' time and they know to search for it. Whereas right now our calendar is sort of spread out. It's not a consistent gap between events, and so you really need to know, okay, there's a SailGP event on this weekend. If we can, and we certainly have a plan to, get to the stage where there's an event every 2 weeks in a broadcast sense, then your fan can switch on. Oh, that's right. There's SailGP's on this weekend. Oh, where is it? Oh, it's in Saint-Tropez. Then they kind of then you're really going to grow it. Beyond where it's capable of going with the current format.
I mean, we've taken a big step towards that. We just announced a bumper calendar for season 4, 14 events. Yep. You must be really excited about that, and some new locations, I think, to be announced down the line. But it really feels like, I think, SailGP story is rising a little bit. This is like there's a lot of momentum and interest from new markets and new places.
Yeah, the growth is incredible. I mean, we've got some announcements coming up with new partners, and obviously we'll announce the detail of some of the venues that we haven't yet announced yet. But it's really exciting. You know, we're seeing a lot of interest now in the property. I think people didn't really know what it would be in the early years, understandably. And now when we can bring people to events, they actually see it, they witness the vibe on site. And I don't even think we've done a great job of that, of transmitting that in the broadcast yet. You know, when people come on site, they still say, wow, this is completely different to what I pictured. And in a way, that's a failing. You know, it shouldn't be a massive surprise. You know, that we should be able to show them what the vibe really is on site. We're learning new stuff all the time, and you look at the challenges that we've had. We had to pause the whole thing with COVID. In actual fact, I've got to say that turned out to be a massive advantage for us. The pause was in the perfect time to be able to reset all of the things that we by then knew that weren't right, and we're able to reset it. We're actually planning another pause at the end of season 4 for the same reason, because we already know that we need to reset some things. We need the time to do that. We need to pause, reset, and then come out even stronger in season 5. So yeah, it hasn't been easy. There has been plenty of challenges, but having said that, they've in turn made us better, and I think we've got a better property for it, you know, in the longer term.
And I suppose the advantage of being, you know, a relatively new property is that SailGP is super agile, and you can make quick decisions to you know, you can make things happen. You don't have necessarily the restrictions that some other more, you know, legacy brands and organisations do have. And we saw that in Cadiz last year, you know, when we decided to put the females on board the boat in the Women's Pathway programme. It's a year since then. We're back in Cadiz now. 25 females have been on board the boats in racing since then. So it must make you really proud to see that kind of, you know, legacy coming to life.
You know, what's been achieved by some of those programs is frankly not promoted enough. You know, it's amazing, and we're right at the beginning of it. We all know that in the Women's Pathway program, you know, what would really change this is if, in my view, the first step would be for a female driver to come in and win a SailGP event. That's the first big step, because you can imagine the impact that would have on all the junior female sailors out there. You know, it would just be dramatic against the best sailors in the world. All of a sudden, there would be a whole lot of young female sailors out there that want to emulate that performance, and right now, that probably hasn't existed yet. You know, so but it's now. I think people are now starting to see, is that achievable? Absolutely, it is.
And I think it's one of those topics, you know, where, you know, you read on social media or you get feedback from people, and everyone has a different opinion, right, about how to implement this kind of program. And the reality is, it's very nuanced, and it's really a really tough and kind of complex situation. I mean, you've been in the game for a long time. How have you seen attitudes towards inclusion and, you know, putting females in the heart of the racing in you know, in important positions on board these kind of boats where they don't have that, you know, necessarily that experience in the past? How have you seen things change in the last decade, 2 decades?
Oh, and even the last 6 months. You know, it's been a massive change. I think top male sailors have now really bought into it. You know, that they can see the value of this. They kind of understand that the way the sport was operating before just wasn't right, and they're also seeing the value in creating that greater depth in their teams is going to serve them well long term. So I think the sailors that bought into that process early have shown the benefits. You know, like the Canadians were a lead example, I think, at the start of this season 3, where they sort of looked at this as a true 6-person crew, reap the benefits of that, and then all the other teams actually were playing catch up at that point, but have since really developed a playbook that really creates the best out of that role.
Is there anyone in that kind of cohort of female athletes who you've seen and thought, yeah, she could be a real star, she's on her way to the top?
Absolutely there is. You're seeing that now. I think we'll see a lot more of it as we develop and as we get our fully fledged simulator on stream, and to be honest with you, that's about 18 months away. Our intention is to mock up a full F50 where a 6-person crew will be able to drill everything on a simulator, including crossing sides and the manoeuvres and so forth. So that's the goal. Once we get to that level, then the sailor training will improve not only for the women's pathway, but the whole talent program will dramatically take a step up. Once we get to that stage, I think the acceleration in the learning and the development of top talent will dramatically improve.
What's the ultimate ambition with the women's pathway program? Because there's a lot of ways to do this, right? I know there's been ideas have been floated by different people about a separate league eventually, or potential. How important is it to you that this is an integrated, mixed thing, or do you think there is some legs in a separate league idea?
Well, all those options have been discussed, and like a lot of the things that we're doing, this is all brand new. And I'm keen not to jump to conclusions too early. We've got to see how this evolves and then make the right decisions. And I think we've done a good job at that so far. And if we had have jumped to a lot of those early decisions too quickly, they would have been wrong, in my opinion. I think we have the time to monitor how this evolves and then make adjustments accordingly. But right now we are gearing up to have a fully integrated league in the sometime in the future, and we want to do that as fast as we possibly can.
I want to talk a little bit about the Impact League because it's a USP of SailGP, and it's something that's I think it's the first time it's ever been done in sport to actually integrate sustainability into the racing. The teams are all putting their best foot forward, as is the organisation. Has it surprised you how it's kind of been adopted and how successful that's become?
I'm not surprised at how successful it is, but what I am surprised at how competitive it's become with the teams. So when we started it, some of the teams, quite frankly, just didn't value it. And they didn't really buy into it. And as time has progressed, I think now if you really did a deep dive into any of those teams, you'd realise that they are super serious about that aspect of our sport. That they really do believe in it, and they've begun to live it. And there's huge now debate over how it should be scored. How it should be. Now the teams are super serious about this, and they're super serious about being more innovative than their competitors. And so I think it has become probably one of our most important USPs in the entire league now. It's gone from being this great idea to something that all of the teams are now really, really living and producing great results from. And the amazing thing is that's making us a lot more efficient as a business too. And if we can reduce the amount of trash that we're producing as a result of these events, then it saves us cost, and we just become our whole operation becomes more efficient. So, and you look at the development of young sailors, for example, because it's not just an environmental impact league. It's the impact is also on equality throughout the league. So the women's pathway, youth involvement, they are critical factors of it. So, and the teams are starting to realise actually we've got to develop that youth pathway for the long-term success of our team. If our driver was sick at the moment, not many of the teams are prepared for that, frankly. That's the reality of the situation today. Whereas a professional sports team can't exist like that. Their fans won't accept the fact that, hey, we had sickness and now we're performing at the back when we were performing at the front, or an injury to an athlete. That's just not acceptable to not have a replacement. So that whole, attitude has changed, and now people are starting to realise, hey, not only is this good for our purpose initiatives, but it's great for business as well.
Obviously, that purpose is in SailGP's DNA. It's been there from the start, essentially. But do you think that's something that other global sports properties or brands should be learning from SailGP? You know, is that something that you hear other organisations or leagues they're interested in how things are being done?
Oh, for sure. A lot of the other sports leagues are looking at this and seeing that it's a pretty cool idea, and that's great. You know, I mean, if they adopt something similar, I think it's fantastic. You know, big picture. We all win if this is done better.
And how can we partner with or work with businesses? You know, how can businesses support SailGP in that mission? What are you looking for in partners? And has your kind of the kind of partners or what they bring to the table, has it changed in the last couple of years?
Oh, that's the exciting thing. I think the partners themselves are now starting to realise how they can use this, and there would not be a new contract that we do these days where the partner isn't requesting some sort of involvement in Champions for Change or the Impact League or the Inspire program or the Women's Pathway program or any of the elements that we're doing. You know, so we're now the first climate positive sports and entertainment property in the world. You know, so that's. I think that's a fantastic achievement, but we haven't done that alone. We've done that with partnerships, and so that's, I think it's really exciting.
Just looking ahead to the future a little bit, how, on a personal level, you know, what drives you in the next kind of 5, maybe 10 years? You know, where do you hope SailGP is, but also what's driving you and motivating you to stay involved and keep pushing? Because it's high intensity and high pressure and high pace, this league, and particularly your role, you know, with all the responsibility.
Well, I've always believed that, or I've always hoped that we could find a way that to better project our sport. And I think this new format where the racing is super exciting is really starting to show that we can do this, you know, and it's certainly really, really exciting. So that's what's driving me. I'm not, whatever goals we have today, we even a lot of our current goals, like we had a goal on the Inspire program to bring 10,000 kids through the program by season 5. We've already pretty much achieved that. So we're having to reset our goals or our audience targets. We've had to reset that halfway through season 3 because we already were achieving the goal. So we said, well, clearly the goal wasn't stretched enough. You know, so I think that is super exciting, and I'm just keen to see, you know, how far this can go. I think we're still right at the beginning. So yeah, exciting times.
I think, you know, you're obviously a very prominent personality in sailing, but quite prominent in SailGP as well. You have your Russell review on the website, and you're prominent in your opinions for sure, which is great. But what do you think the public perception of you is, and is it correct? What do you think? You know, is there a part of your personality that people probably don't see, or?
Perhaps it's, for those that have known me for quite a few years, perhaps it's pretty obvious that I probably haven't, rightly or wrongly, given a lot of weight to public perception of what I do or who I am. You know, I've received my fair share of criticism over the years, and so in a way I've learnt to just, in many ways, block that out. And we get a lot of opinion around what we should be doing with SailGP, and in a way that's great. But I'm not necessarily swayed by that opinion. I tend to rely a lot on data these days, on because when we're doing our audience surveys, we get really good data back now on what is really needed and what's right and wrong. And so I tend to trust the data a lot more than I would, for example, a populist viewpoint of the avid sailor, because we're really trying to grow this sport beyond the avid sailor. And so, you know, like there's a lot of debate around how we should portray the speed of the boats. And I know now having looked at the audience surveys, what that right answer is. But that's in conflict to what a lot of the avid sailors think. Too bad. I'm going to do what the data says, and so in a way, whilst I certainly consider the opinion, lots of opinions out there, we certainly treat that seriously. We're not necessarily influenced by that, opinion.
Final question from me. We always ask our guests a $1 million question. The sailors go racing for $1 million, and we ask the $1 million question. My $1 million question to you is: a lot of the newer audience maybe don't realise that you're quite a very successful sailor yourself. Won Olympic gold medal. You've won some of the biggest and best prizes in sport.
Well, that was in my past life.
Multiple-time world champion. I'll ask you to indulge me a little bit on that. If you were at your peak racing on the F50, where do you think you'd finish in the fleet?
Tough question. I mean, the quality of racing's really high now. I think to myself, I would have loved to have competed in this league. It's right up my alley in a lot of ways. The racing is tight, the boats are equal, so there's no excuses for non-performance. So, and it's highly technical. So I think I would have enjoyed that side of it. But where I would have stacked up against Tom Slingsby or Pete Burling or Ben Ainsley or Jimmy Spittle or whoever else, I've really no idea. It's hard to judge. I would hope that I would have been duking it out with them, but whether that would have been the case or not, I think it's highly open to debate. The other thing I'd say about this is, people talk about the $1 million, but there's $4.3 million of prize money now in SailGP, and that's growing rapidly. So we started off at a position, and like everything else we're doing, it's growing rapidly. That in even half a season's time, that'll be increased quite dramatically again, I'm sure.
So you'd aim for your share of that 4.3 million, couple of podiums.
And that's bonus money too. Don't forget, these guys are professionals. The sailors on board are being paid to race. So this is a bonus pool, if you like. And I think the bonus pools, I like the fact that we reward great performance. And I think it should be always retained as that. I don't think you should be awarded any bonus money for finishing last. Of course not. Why? In fact, top performance to me is a podium result. And so, that's what I believe we should be rewarding as a bonus.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time, Russell. Really appreciate it, and sharing some of the exciting future in SailGP. We'll let you get off. I know you've got places to go, people to see ahead of the Spain Sail Grand Prix, which is going to be awesome this weekend. So thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Jono. Thank you.